Hi, I'm Dr. Stacia Alexander. Welcome back to Goals Don't Have Feelings. We are in our third season of this wonderful show. And this particular series is focused on the emotionality of politics. If you have not been tuning in, I urge you to go to my Facebook channel or the YouTube channel and catch up on the episodes that I have had with some wonderful guests highlighting the emotionality of politics. You know how I love talking about success, but some of the things that we're dealing with in today's time require some considerations. I think they require some dialogues. And this is one of those that I thought would be impactful in considering what we're going through during this election period. So I'm glad that you're joining me. If you don't know me, this is your first time here, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. Looking forward to the engagement. But I'm a licensed professional counselor by trade. I've been doing mental health services for over 20 years. I take joy in being a mental health advocate, which I think pulls it from a micro setting to a macro setting where I can talk to people about the basic tenets of mental health. And the reason I do that is to remove the stigma of mental health that has plagued our communities for so long. If you don't know as well, another thing, my family and I have written a book with my husband and my kids, and it's called The Balancing Act Family Guide, basic principles on parenting that I think have long been forgotten. So after we all sat down and talked about it, we just, hey, let's put it in a book. Let's see how that goes. Also, I run an annual program called AUX Accountability, and it's about your goals. It's about goal setting, but not just setting a goal and leaving it there. We actually walk you through 4 different quadrants to help you understand how all of these different pieces of the puzzle need to fit together in order for you to have high levels of accountability, and then you'll have a greater sense of peace. All of that information can be found on my website, including past episodes of Goals Don't Have Feelings. And my website is www.staciaalexander.com. I appreciate you joining me. Tonight's guest is attorney Sandre Moncriffe. I asked her to join us because she's been involved in politics on a couple of levels, not just through the legal system, but also as a candidate. So I think she can bring us another perspective that, you know, us as lay people wouldn't have, and kind of walk us through some things. I'm glad that she's joining us. I think it's going to be some fabulous conversation and dialogue and help us really understand how much of an emotional impact politics has on our day-to-day lives. If you haven't already, please just take a little brief moment to invite people to this conversation. You can do that by sharing the episode, or you can host a watch party. That would be great as well. And then you and your friends can have a private conversation, if you will, on what you think about the things that we're talking about. But we would love to hear your chats. We would love to see your chats in our boxes so that we can engage with you as well. I am very interactive, if you don't know already. I appreciate you joining us. Let's get ready for Sandre, just a great person. I've watched her for over a year now. We're colleagues in a professional organization. So I think you're going to get some good information. Okay, so I asked Sandre to join me for this series of Goals Don't Have Feelings because of her history, because of her background. She has been an attorney for a while now. She's going to give us a lot more details about that. And she's also run for an office. So thank you for joining us, Sandre. I appreciate it. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I thought of you because I remember your campaign. Was it a year ago now, or?
It ended probably March of this year. So it's been 2 campaigns that kind of ran together. So okay. It seems like, yeah.
So tell us a little about that. 2 campaigns. I knew one, but what's the other one?
So the second one was basically for the same thing. I ran for judge a second time. So the first time I ran was in the 2018 primary cycle.
Okay.
And then once that campaign ended, unfortunately, one of our judges in office passed away. And so then that created an opening and an opportunity to run again. And so basically I just picked up and started running again. So it kind of all ran together, as most people say.
I didn't. Okay, got you. All right. So yeah, we'll talk about that a lot more too. And then what are you doing now? What's your role now?
My role now is I'm the managing attorney of the Moncrieffe Law Firm. We're a family law attorney where we primarily cater to clients needing assistance in the areas of divorce, child support, custody, child support enforcement or custody enforcement, as well as child welfare. That's when CPS goes in and removes children from homes. So those are all the types of cases that we handle in my office.
Okay. So that's something we have in common, because my private practice, we've done child protective services at contract. Like that's where I started, like 20-something years ago. And I've never released that contract. So I have experience with family law from the other side of the table. Okay. So let's start. Thank you for sharing that. Let's start with the premise of this series. Do you think that there is a place to discuss emotionality or politics at any time during the election or any other time of the year?
I think one of the most appropriate times is right now.
Okay.
Because I think that there's a lot of emotions surrounding this particular elections and elections in general. I mean, people vote based on their emotions, their connections with candidates, and some people are squarely focused on the issues. So I think that there is no set time to talk about that kind of stuff. I guess it just depends on your setting, the folks that you're with, and certainly the context.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. And without getting into any political affiliation or who you're voting for, who you're not voting for, what do you think? Like, what would you say to a first-time voter in terms of emotionality? Because I've been on Zoom, Zoom parties. I've been on Zoom parties with college students watching the debates.
Yes.
The first debate. And then I went, my nephew, he's very in tune to politics now. And he just was asking so many questions about the conduct and the behavior. He was shocked by how both candidates conducted themselves. What would you say to a first-time voter? What are some things that you would talk to them about?
I think I would tell anybody, just focus squarely on what's at issue for you. Okay. I think a lot of times we as voters, we like to think, oh, well, do I like this person because of this or because of that? But for some people, like you've heard the description, some people are one-issue candidates, right? So for some people, abortion may be the sole issue that they care about. And whether or not that candidate fits into that box of being pro-choice or pro-life, that's going to resonate with them. Whereas for some people, they need more of a personal connection. Like, do I like that guy? Do I think, remember a couple of years ago, the infamous beer garden situation where I remember people saying, well, I think I would like to vote for this person because I think I would like to get somebody I think I could hang out with and have a beer with.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas there are some voters like me, those things don't resonate with me. I'm not caught up in the emotionality of it. And I think for anybody, you just have to figure out what issues are most important to you, especially first-time voters. Try to figure out what issues are most important to you. And you're probably going to have to dig deep inside yourself and figure out what are your core values, which mostly aligns with your core values of who you think you are and what type of representation you think that you need and which candidate is going to advance your interests the furthest.
You know, this was something that I was struggling with the other night as well, especially after 50 Cent came out and endorsed Donald Trump. And then a couple of other articles that I read about people voting on their money. Like, to me, it's so focused on self, what's just best for self rather than what's good for the greater. Like, I don't understand how to, like, that doesn't resonate with me because I'm always looking out for other people. Maybe that's a fault. I don't know. Maybe I do it to a fault. But what do you think about that? Like, it's so individualistic. It's no longer community or solidarity or doing what's best for the greater good. It's just me. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think that comes down to, again, the individuality of politics and what is that issue that, as they would say, gets your goat. For a lot of people, taxes. It's taxes. It's nothing else. I don't care about anything else. I just care about taxes. Like in 50 Cent's case, he's says, I think this person has concerns with Black people, but I don't care about that. I just don't want to pay more taxes. So, and I think that it speaks to, some of that speaks to, or there's this critique of Americans that we advance the me over we a lot more than other civilizations or other cultures do.
Mm-hmm.
We're a very individualistic culture where we focus on specifically what's going to affect the individual as opposed to the whole. And so, again, if that winds up being who you are as a voter, then that's just who you are as a voter. I can say for me, personally, I'm not focused on any one issue. There are a number of issues that I think that are impactful. And so I cast my vote that way.
You know, even when looking at, like when I was thinking about 50 Cent and Ice Cube and Kanye West, like I totally get not wanting to pay as much in taxes. I pay quite a bit in taxes, especially as a small business owner. I pay a lot. And the amount I pay actually makes a difference in my standard of living. I can be honest on that. I don't see that having a difference in their standard of living when you make that much money per year. That's my issue with them, is that, okay, dude, come on. It's just not going to change the car you drive, the house you live in, the neighborhood, the trips you take. You paying taxes is not going to change your standard of living. Me paying higher taxes down here, it'll determine what school my kids can go to, if you think about it. So that's my issue that I have with them without getting on this political platform. But the other part is this last minute entry into the discussion, and emotionally how that puts people in a difficult place. Do I align with the celebrity that I admire, or do I align with what's, for the greater good? Like, to me, that puts people in a bad headspace. What do you think?
Yeah, but again, I just have to remind people, you got to bring it back home. Okay. So 50 Cent and 50 Cent, Ice Cube, and Kanye, their reality is completely different from yours, right? They have the money to operate at a certain level. You don't. You might be able to benefit from no tax increases for folks who make under 400,000. I know I would. but also I am a small business owner, and that does resonate with me, because of course it affects whether or not I'll be able to hire an assistant, or if I hire an assistant and I bring in more revenue, then that's going to affect certain things there too, as well as my standard of living. But again, folks, we got to be able to see the big picture, and the big picture is we got to be able to figure out how to operate with what's best for the whole, as opposed to sometimes just focusing on just the one individual thing.
Do you think that's where we got away from keeping our politics private? Like when I was growing up, you never ever told anybody who you voted for. Like I remember asking my dad, who did you vote for? That's not something that you tell people. You go figure out on who you're going to vote for. Like, where did that change? Why did we start telling people who we vote for?
I think that in some ways I struggle with that, because I find it to be so strange, because I feel like with my children, I am raising them to be thinkers. So I want them to be able to critique, and I want them to be able to understand why I made this decision or that decision. And even with just watching the news and just seeing the commercials, the observations that my almost 15-year-old and my 12-year-old make, it's astonishing how savvy they are already. With just paying attention to the commercials, they watch the debates, and they're forming their opinions. I think that our world has just changed so much in terms of, we have the internet now, and we share so much about who we are on Facebook and other social media platforms. So I think again, that's going to come down to a personal thing. There are people who are just not comfortable discussing their politics ever, and they never will be, and they shouldn't have to be forced to. And then there are people who live out loud and who will, yell it from the rooftops and say, hey, just the simple act of putting your yard sign in your yard is living out loud, right? And saying, this is who I support, and this is who I want to vote for. So I think that with the advent of the internet and social media, the times have just changed, and it's just certainly given people feel more empowered than to speak about their choices.
And you know, so when you talk about yard signs, this is one of the experiences that I have now. I'm very like on my morning walks, that gives me a lot of time to think, right? Probably the only time I'm not multitasking. But
Right.
um we're in, you know, we're in Trump territory out here.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel some kind of way. I feel unwelcomed. That's the only
Mm-hmm.
word that I can come up with. I feel unwelcomed now when I walk down the street. Not that it changes my route, not that
Mm-hmm.
it changes my attitude or anything, but I definitely feel unwelcomed. Like I second guess, what do you really think of me when I see,
Right.
you know, when I see the person that comes out of this house? What do you really think of me? Whereas if I hadn't seen the sign, I never would have considered that. And
Yeah.
that's where the, if this is a word, boisterousness,
Mm-hmm.
boisterousness. I don't even know how to say it.
Yeah.
The you know, being so boisterous with who you support,
Yeah.
it just seems so like they mean it as an insult. Like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
walk by me with a "Make America Great" hat again, and you speak, and you have no awareness of how offensive that is to me. And if you are aware, you don't really care. So that's why
Yeah.
I think, you know, the emotionality of politics is a total disregard for
Mm-hmm.
how your aggressiveness impacts who I am as a person. Like, I don't, what do you think? I could go on, but what do you think?
So I think that so politics has become so tribal, right?
Okay.
We can certainly blame it on this administration, but I think even prior to that, like I'm reading this book that I've been reading it for some time, Red and Blue, the tribalism of politics and how politics just got to the point where it is now. And it's fascinating because it takes you all the way back to the 80s with Speaker of the House, I can't think of his name, Newt Gingrich, talking about his beginnings and when the Republican Party changed and when things started to go south in terms of getting so tribalistic to where we can't meet each other halfway anymore. And it's got to be my group wins and my group has this effect, all the way up through the Tea Party movement and how that changed the Republican Party. I mean, it's fascinating. So it's a lot of stuff. So it's a great book to check out if you're interested in reading about politics, figuring out about how all that works. But I say, I mention all of that to say, I just think we are just at a different time in politics. And no matter who we are, we can't help but be impacted by all of the negativity or the issues and the images that we see. I can totally relate to what you're saying because I was driving through a certain area recently, and the amount of signs that I saw, I jokingly said to my daughter, Lord, I feel like I'm in a sundowner town. We got to get out of here. I don't want to be around here after a certain time.
Yeah.
However, at the same time, I had to give her the other side of it and just have that other thing to say, because you have to tell yourself that people are not bad people just because of who they choose to support. Sometimes it comes down again to just that issue. For some of those people, it's that one issue. They only care about taxes, or they only care about abortion rights, or they only care about gun rights, or it just may be just that one particular issue for them, and none of the other stuff matters. And at the end of the day, I think that on both sides, you got folks who it doesn't matter what happens, this is the candidate they support, and it doesn't matter what anybody else says. This is the candidate that they are going to support. But I think that as human beings, we can't help but be impacted by all the things that we see and all the things that we hear. Even, I don't even want to call it folks who have, I'll say folks who have a certain level of education or folks who are critical thinkers, right? I think even critical thinkers, and not to say that on people without a college degree aren't critical thinkers, but folks who are critical thinkers in general, even those type of people get impacted by, they make inferences, and this stuff kind of just, it feeds into your psyche, right? It just intrudes on your soul. I mean, it just does. And I think that we take our cues from that and we act accordingly.
Yeah, I appreciate this discussion. I don't know if you can tell, like I really get in my head.
Yeah.
But when you say that it intrudes our psyche and our soul,
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
what like that's why I have to make sure I don't go to bed to CNN because
Yes.
that stuff creeps into your night, when you're really digesting it. But I'm
Yes.
here's a little bit. What about decorum? Do you like how do we talk to our kids? Like you talk to your daughter, I talk to my adult kids. How do you talk to them, especially these little kids, about decorum when you know for certain it's different acceptances based on race? And that's just been lately with this last cycle. But did you hear President Obama's speech about if he had done something, if he had done what Trump had done, they would have ran him out of the White House? Like I wanted to scream, like, I am so glad you're finally saying this on not a national platform, but an international platform, because nobody else is talking about that. What do you think that does to our like people, period, not just Black kids? What do you think that does for people in general to see this particular high person in office with such a low level of decorum?
I mean, I think it totally is. It's so disruptive, right? For example, like with the last debate, I saw a lot of teachers saying how they regretted that they had encouraged their students to watch the debate because it turned out to be such a debacle and such a low performance in decorum. And so the sad thing is we all used to be able to say, right? Okay, look to your president. I'm just going to put it out there. Look to your president to see how he acts. And there's such a level of dignity with that station that we hold it in the highest regard. And so we expect the occupants to put forth that certain level of decorum. And I don't care who you are, whether you're in support or not support. That is the one thing I think we should all be able to agree on as Americans, that the level of decorum has just sunk into a new low. But I think that we still got to be the parents. We still have to teach our kids what's wrong and what's right. And I remember that's one of the things that former President Obama pointed out yesterday. We wouldn't accept that behavior from your high school principal. You couldn't go to the school and the principal talks like that and acts like that, does that kind of stuff. So why is it acceptable at any level? And then we also tell our kids, you're not going to get rewarded for bad behavior. So how come, we're sending so many mixed messages by condoning and accepting that poor level of behavior. But I think at the end of the day, we still got to know what's right and what's wrong. And we still have to be able to steer our children in that proper way. And just like how we tell them, I don't care what your friend's doing in this house, this is what I say, and that's what you're going to do. It's the same thing. We don't care what the president's doing. If the president wants to tweet and cuss people out and act crazy, you can't do that, right? And then we take it another step further, and we know that for our Black and brown children, especially, that get persecuted at school, that have higher records of discipline, that have higher records of being handcuffed and removed from classrooms, 6-year-olds, just because of what we would perceive to be smaller, in fact, infractions just based on the color of their skin. We know that there's certain things that we can't do. But again, we got to go back to the parental influence. And for the kids who don't have that type of parental influence, then Lord bless the teachers who are able to snatch somebody up and say, let me help you before you get yourself into another space based on your inability to control your decorum.
So you know what that brings me to this topic. Do you think that because of all of this sidetrack focus that we have during the election period, that some things are getting lost in the dialogue? Because you're in family law, we're in the middle of a pandemic. I know that there's child abuse, domestic violence going on. Do you think some issues are getting lost in the midst of this mess?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's this pandemic has totally, if nothing else, what it has been successful at doing is highlighting all of the flaws in our system, right? I mean, if we're talking about in terms of family laws, we have parents with real concerns about possession and access issues. So, for example, the Supreme Court of Texas, very early at the beginning of the pandemic, said, listen, we don't care that it's COVID. If you're supposed to be exchanging children, you just need to exchange the children, period, right? But then you've got some folks with some real concerns because at my house, we are wearing the masks, we are hand washing, we are not being exposed to 5 million people. But when you go over to the other parent's house, they don't wear no masks. They do whatever they want to do. And they are exposing themselves or putting themselves at inherent risks. And unfortunately, they're not able to come together to talk about or to act in their own best interest to figure out some common ground for their kids. So there's some flaws there. But at the end of the day, parents just deserve to see their kids no matter what. I mean, because that bond is, that bond is just unconditional.
Yeah.
And another flaws we have is for children in foster care, right? So we've had issues with a lot of those kids have supervised access to their parents, but because of the pandemic, got to do a lot of those visits on Zoom. Sometimes the judges try, based on the situation, to allow the parents to have in-person visits, but then we wind up with somebody testing positive for COVID, and then we got to yank and shut down visits. So that's another situation that's kind of left upended. Then there's also the issue of trying to get cases to jury trial in a safe way. We're just not able to accommodate that right now. And there are cases that demand a jury trial. They, the litigants would rather have a jury trial than have the judge decide, but we're just not able to accommodate that in a safe way right now. And so it's that balancing test. Right now, for example, with family courts, we are not, December 1st is the next deadline they gave us where they're talking about in-person court appearances as well as the possibility of jury trials. But then again, with just this recent spike, you don't know what's going to happen. Some of us are thinking we're not going to see the inside of that courthouse until next year, possibly get a little further along. And then there are real issues with school for families right now. Again, we've got the tug of war in one, at your mom's house, for example. Your mom says, we're doing virtual schooling. I'm not sending you out there. But when you go to your dad's house, especially sometimes there's some kids who are in what's called the week on, week off possession, where I literally live at dad's house one week and live at mom's house the other week. And dad says, I'm not doing virtual schooling. I'm dropping you off at that campus. And then the school is caught up in the middle. And then folks aren't able to work together to figure out what's the best solution for their child. And then it's all of that. It's all of that. So it's certainly brought to the forefront a lot of different issues. Then we also have the issue of, I always like to tell people this, what do you call that? Mass incarceration and how it impacts families.
Okay.
You know about that in terms of especially the child welfare cases, right? When folks get arrested and there is nobody else to place children with and they got to come into the system. Well, guess what? Their cases aren't moving along either. So they're not going to be successfully disposed of in time for them to be a viable placement option for their children. So kids have to we got some kids who are going to kind of sit in foster care, and we're having to extend those cases in order to accommodate, again, having a jury trial. It could be a jury trial on the family law side to see whether or not you get your kid back, or it could be a jury trial on the criminal side to see whether or not you're going to be exonerated from your charges or whatever. So there are a lot of issues that are not being addressed, and it's not wholly and solely for the lack of people trying. It's just that the pandemic has just crippled us in such awesome ways that just more than we could even fathom.
Yeah, it'll be years. I think I saw an interview the other day that said 16 years to recover from this. Yeah, that's what he said. Financially, in terms of societal norms, that it'll be 16 years. let's talk about you personally as an attorney and working in this field. Like emotionally, how do you deal with your success? Like you're a partner in a law firm, you run for political offices. Like how do you deal with the emotionality of success, the journey?
So it's a journey that's it's fraught with good and bad, and it takes a toll on your family. I mean, if I'm just being honest, I mean, I've been in 2 campaigns over the past 3 years, and my family has been along with me on every step of that journey. It's missed time. It's missed opportunities for connecting with my children. I thank God that I have the type of support that I do in terms of my husband. He's very supportive, and I have a mom who is able to come over and help out. But my children have aged and matured along the way. So this last campaign wasn't as bad as the first campaign because they were a little older and they were just a lot more self-sufficient. But I think that there's sacrifice in success, right? You know that. There's sacrifice in success, and there's sacrifice in putting yourself out there, whether it be if you're trying to build the best law practice in the world or the best any type of business in the world, as well as sacrifice in running for office by stepping into the arena and making yourself vulnerable and asking people to support you and to vote for you. But there are a lot of lessons you learn from it, right, about yourself. Because, for example, I didn't realize how resilient I was to having lost my first campaign and then to turn right around again and campaign again and to lose a second time. I mean, it beats you up. I mean, honestly, there's that part of you that's like, what am I doing? What am I doing? But, I have, thank God I have a supportive circle, and I just, my family's supportive, my circle is supportive, but at the end of the day, I pray. I gotta pray. And lately, I've been doing way more meditating than I normally used to do. And that's helpful too, because it just brings you clarity. And one thing I just tell God, I said, Lord, if this is not what you have for me, remove that desire so that I don't continue down a path that you don't think is my purpose. And so far, he has not removed that desire, right?
I feel if it's not for me, Lord, remove it. Like there's nothing I can do to ignore the fact, like this isn't a hill I have to overcome. This isn't a lesson I need to learn. This is something that you absolutely do not want me to do. I just knock me dead in the head. Like it's just deny it. But you pretty much what about politics and the legal system? Like I know we need more people of color involved in our civic responsibilities. What do you think we need to do as early as elementary school and middle school to not necessarily groom children to enter into, the legal arena or politics, but actually to expose them more to what they could do in terms of civic duty? What do you think we need to do?
Well, I think we got to do a better job. Part of the downside of let's not talk politics is they say that if you are not sitting at the table, then you're going to be on the menu. If you don't do politics, then politics will do you. And I think a lot of times when we encourage people, oh, you just got to stay silent, don't talk about politics, I hate politicians, don't be involved in politics, we forget that there are so many different layers of politics. Let's talk about our local level. For example, what got me started in politics was recess, right? Recess for school. So I was a parent, and I had just started in the school district, and my kids were kindergarten and second grade. And they went to school and they came home the first day and were all excited. And I said, well, hey, what about recess? Did y'all go to recess? And they said, we don't have any recess. And I said, what do you mean there's no recess? And they said, yeah, they told us we don't do recess. And then so my second grader goes, well, we do PE. And then the little one, the kindergartner, says, there are no slides in PE. Right? So then me being the mom that I am, lawyer mom, I immediately sent off a letter to the principal, and I'm like, hey, what is this? What do you mean we don't have recess? And he says, oh, that's a new policy that the district implemented this year. We don't do recess, we do 15-minute brain breaks. And I said, okay, that doesn't sound good. I'm going to do my research and I'll get back to you. So I started pulling research from everywhere. What were schools doing with recess? And I was starting to find that especially in our communities, African American communities, a lot of schools were doing away with recess. Guess why? They wanted more time for testing because they wanted better performance on the test. But then, of course, you had the American Pediatric Association as well as other professional associations said, no, children learn best at play. They need that break, right? So I put together this entire PowerPoint and I got to researching, okay, well, who's above the principal and how does that work? And I realized there's a superintendent. Who's above the superintendent? The school board. And so I started off on this journey where I wrote the superintendent, and I said, hey, I'm understanding that there's no recess. What is this about? He says, oh, well, that's just the district policy. And I said, well, how is that okay? And who else do I talk to? Let's have a meeting. We had a meeting. We agreed to disagree. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to approach the school board. And so my husband is looking on from the sides, and he's like, what in the world? What are you doing? What is happening? So I put my PowerPoint together, and I go to the school board, and I did a presentation on the citizen comments about how the school district had gotten rid of recess, and they hadn't exactly followed the law. There's something in Texas called the SHAC committee. It's your safety, health, and wellness committee, and every single school district is supposed to have that committee, and anything that impacts the health and welfare of students has to come through that committee. Your school board is supposed to appoint members to this committee, and the committee has to be specifically comprised of teachers, parents, and community members. And then that committee should have made a recommendation about recess, and then that would have been reported to the school board, and then the school board could have made a vote about policy. Well, based on my advocacy, the school board, we became, I think, the first school board in the entire state of Texas to adopt a mandatory 30-minute recess policy for elementary age kids. Meaning that 30 minutes, you must go outside, or you have to stay inside if it's inclement weather, obviously. Children must play. It cannot be directed by the teachers. It is purely their time to be in the playground and just to do something. And it was just amazing that there were so many school districts who were getting rid of recess. And then after we passed that policy, a couple of years later, DISD got a policy as well and also expanded their policy. Recently, I think Fort Worth ISD expanded their policy to also make mandatory a couple of other breaks, including recess. But I say all that to say, it was that little thing like recess that got me interested in policy. And so because I got interested in policy and how does a school district pass policy, and who holds the school board accountable, and how do the school board people get there, I decided to run for office. And I ran and won for school board, and I served on the school board for just one term.
Okay.
But we have to start educating people from a very early age about the different layers of our government and why each layer is important. And we can do that by having folks come in and talk to people. We can do that we got to encourage volunteering. I mean, I think one of the most rewarding things is working on a campaign. Seeing how that works. How do you raise money? How do you go out and talk to people? If it's even doing something simple as handing out flyers for a candidate, but just getting engaged and getting involved. And we have to remove the stigma of politics is just bad and we should just stay away from it. No, we can't just stay away from politics, because again, then we become uninformed. Mm-hmm. We become uninformed voters who are just running around picking any name that we see on the ballot. I mean, there's this whole talk about the first name on the ballot and how if the name is simple and you think it sounds like so-and-so, then you're going to pick it. But then you don't realize that you're picking the worst candidate possible. Or, you know what I'm saying? It could be anything like that. But we have to remove the stigma of politics. And I think if we are more educated about how things affect us on a daily basis, and I always take it to the school board, for example, because most people have kids in school. Right? For example, your kids at the charter school, they got a school board, but who put them there? the folks at the charter school. Whereas the kids at the public school, they have a school board, but who put them there? You, the parents, and the community. So they're more apt to be responsive to what you have to say because you vote them in and you vote them out.
Right.
Whereas, for example, at charter school, you don't have a say in that at all. You just have a board presiding over your school, and they're answerable to no one but
themselves.
Possibly the state of Texas. But yeah, it's just a whole different level. So I think we have to engage people differently about politics.
And so really changing the mindset, almost like with mental health, just change the mindset towards politics and garner more interest. This has been a great conversation. Thank you for being so transparent and open, just really opening up that discussion on the emotionality of politics. It's more than just going to the polls or just getting people to vote. There's a lot that's involved in it. So next week after the election's on Tuesday. I don't know that we'll have the final answers Tuesday, but on that Thursday, I'm going to host a debriefing workshop, if you will, to kind of help people understand just how to come down from all of this and really focus and perhaps even include what can you do to offset this wealth of, this abundance of feelings that you have after coming out of this election 2020. Right.
I think, what I hope we take away from all of it is, well, for one, we've got some people engaged in politics at a level that they had not been before. And we hope that momentum continues. We've also been able to engage some younger people in a way that we had not been able to engage them before. And you just certainly hope that continues. But unfortunately, there will always be the folks who are lesser engaged, but it's up to us more engaged folks to try to do a little bit more to try to pull them along and encourage them. I guess that's why they say, don't go to the polls by yourself, bring somebody with you, right? Yeah. I mean, I get people who, this is purely an anecdote. A friend of mine just sent me a text and said, hey, there are 3 propositions on the ballot. I have no idea. I have no idea what they are. And so I just got to explain to her, and she explained to her what it was via text. And she texted me back. She said, girl, thank God for my Apple Watch. I saw your text from my Apple Watch. And so I was able to figure out how to vote properly for these propositions.
You helped her out.
I know. I thought that was so hilarious.
Yeah, because we all need help. But my city has a group for Black women, Black moms, and they put the propositions in there, and it helps. Like for me to go through there, that really helps. So I'm like, I agree with you. If we just kind of pull somebody with us, if we're interested, pull one person, they'll pull one person, and we can stand out and get it covered. So will you tell people how to contact you at the law firm if they are interested in your services?
Sure. You can reach me at Moncriffe Law Firm. My name is spelled Moncriffe, Moncriffe, law firm at gmail.com. That's the easiest way to reach me. People also reach me via my Instagram page. It's S Moncriffe. My first initial, last name, S Moncriffe. You can at me that way at Instagram. Those are the 2 best ways to reach me. Also, the most important way, phone, 972-885-9791.
This has been great. I appreciate it. Hopefully you can join us for the debriefing talk that we have. I think that's going to be pretty great. And I appreciate you coming on. This has been a great.
Thank you for having me. It's been very refreshing. It's just great to get that information out.
Oh my gosh, that was a great conversation. I think we covered so many different areas that I really hadn't even thought of when you talk about the emotionality of politics. But her having run for office, she was able to explore how that felt losing 2 times, how she has felt running a law practice, being involved in school politics, and that actually catapulting her to the next level. But even integrating all of these different areas of politics that we're just not talking about enough. And if we can do it on this show, you can do it in your homes, and you can do it with your neighbors, and you can do it with your friends and family. So I appreciate you joining me for this episode in the series of the Emotionality of Politics. I'm Dr. Stacia Alexander, of course. make sure that you register for that free workshop that we're going to have 2 days after the election to kind of debrief from the things that we have experienced over this long haul. I'm not your therapist, but I can certainly share some information with you that will help you understand emotionally how much of an impact it has had on us. And, share it with somebody else. I would really appreciate that. Do that for me if you will share the invitation with other people, because I do think we need to talk about this more openly. Not necessarily who you voted for or who you do or who you don't like, but how this has impacted you emotionally. That is my primary factor. And being able to talk with Attorney Moncrieffe on so many different levels has only added to my resolve to have that workshop. So guys, thank you for tuning in. If you do not already, follow me on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube at Dr. Stacia Alexander, and you'll see amazing content. I will actively interact with you because I love the dialogue, because I feel like every conversation, somebody has another window into how much of an integral part mental health should be in our lives. So you guys, thank you. Have an amazing evening, and I will see you